Hey everyone, it's Alex. We've got one of the biggest OTAs we've ever gotten in Marvel Snap's history here, and it's a doozy. There's a lot of big changes here and some massive nerfs to cards that, quite frankly, had to get nerfs. We got some buffs to some cards that have been dead for some time, so there's a lot to talk about here, so I'm actually excited to get into it. Right off the rip, we are seeing a massive change to Arishem, and I think that obviously there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be really excited about this. Arishem's been a thorn in the side for players for a long time. You got a 53% win rate, which has been solid for forever. You have a 14% meta share, which remember was way higher at some point, and Arishem's play rate has come down quite significantly. However, it's still problematic to some degree. Now, there's another side to this conversation, which is that there's a lot of players that really like Arishem. Right, there's a lot of players out there that like Arishem. It's a particularly new player friendly card because it kind of gives them access to cards they might not have otherwise had. It benefits from having a lot of like tech pieces, which tend to be like early pools anyway. So there's some like pain points for nerfing Arishem like across the broader community, but as a whole I guess it had to happen, and what you're seeing is a major change here. You're seeing on turn 3 getting max +1 energy. One of the key things about Arishem prior was that having the max energy right from the get-go made those early turns and those early draws just kind of like easy. You had a larger kind of scope to play with in terms of energy to play on turn 1, 2, and 3. Now you don't have that. It also slows down Loki, so Loki's no longer going to be a core component of Arishem, possibly, because you can't just play him on turn 1. You got to wait till turn 2. Oh no, what are you going to do, right? But another key thing about this is at the bottom here, that they've adjusted the effect to only add cards that didn't start in your deck. That is a very significant change because there were times where, like, you've probably mentioned it or seen it, where you get Alioth once and then you get Alioth twice. You're like, what just happened? Like, how do I get Alioth on turn 5 and then Alioth on turn 6 as well? Like, that's absolutely insane. But those are the kind of things that were happening, right? So it's one of those things to kind of keep in mind. So yeah, Arishem getting nerfed, it probably had to happen. Let's be honest. But I think there's going to be players probably a little disappointed. But for the most part, statistics showcasing that this probably had to happen. Now, this surprised me a lot. I did not expect to see Typhoid Mary get a -2. Now, keep in mind that it no longer applies to the entire board. It's just to cards here, and it's still been a core component of the Surtur decks. Now, Surtur has been very good, but like hasn't been like a meta shaker in a way. You're still seeing only a 5% meta share of Typhoid Mary, who's been a core component of those decks. 54% win rate, and it's interesting because in the notes here, they're saying that Surtur has been clearly their best deck. And I think that Untapped doesn't necessarily support that. And I think that's a really interesting conversation piece because our Untapped statistics obviously don't take into account like the more casual players. And so when we kind of look at the Untapped based stats, we're often taking a snapshot of the more competitive minded players, or the players that are at least running the Untapped kind of like process or on the computer, whatever. And so like, you'd hope that Second Dinner has a much more complete data set, and they're saying that Surtur has been the best deck, and that doesn't surprise me, honestly. It's been great for me. Like, I still play it, especially since the meta share came down. I don't feel as ashamed playing it, so it's been fun. And so it doesn't surprise me that they go after some of the cards in the shell, and Typhoid's not even the last one that got nerfed. That was a core component of that shell, okay? Because Alioth getting a hit from 6'10 to 6'9, nice. But like, I think that Alioth's been a pain point in a lot of people for a long time, and I think that what you'll see is a 52% win rate, but a 26% meta share. Like, that's way too high. A 26% meta share for what's effectively one of the strongest tech cards in the game is probably too high. I mean, Shang-Chi's 30, Shadow King's 26. But do we want Alioth on the same play rate as Shang-Chi and Shadow King? Like, that's something I'll ask you guys for the comments. Like, really, like, is Alioth, Shang-Chi, and Shadow King, are they cut from the same cloth? Is having them at the same meta share fine? Is it okay? I don't think it is. I think Alioth is probably should be lower, and so for that reason, this change probably makes sense. It's also noted that Alioth was a core component of the Surtur decks, which I was a huge proponent of. Like, I mentioned this in my Surtur review video. My first deck I created had Alioth, and other people didn't have Alioth in their decks. I said that doesn't make any sense. This card has to be there. And sure enough, it definitely made those decks better. Seeing Alioth get nerfed doesn't necessarily surprise me, but I also didn't necessarily have this on my bingo card. Now, this here is a very fascinating change. We got a Series 1 card getting buffed, which I love. Seeing a Series 1 card get buffed is huge because I think that they need to improve some of the cards that most people have. And at a 52% win rate and a 5% meta share, Enchantress has just been kind of outclassed by Rogue lately because, like, what happened was you saw this real big resurgence of a lot of the ongoing cards when Agent Venom came out, because the Mystiques and the Iron Man were being hit by the Agent Venom. Now you have the Gore as well. So like you need some sort of counterplay towards ongoing. And Enchantress makes a lot of sense. And they do mention in the notes here, you also have US Agent, Darkhawk, Mobius, Gore. They're just tons of cards. One key thing worth mentioning here is that the Ajax decks have been performing very well. And so Enchantress makes sense from that standpoint. However, I still think it might be outclassed by Rogue. But this is a much more natural, easy inclusion, especially when you start to consider how many Zabu cards have been coming out. We've gotten a lot of cards lately that were like, this is probably a Zabu card. It's a 4 cost or whatever. So now this benefits from that as well. So you're starting to see like this well-rounded approach to like what Zabu now looks like with all these 4 drops that are worth playing. And obviously Enchantress at a 3 cost can now become a very powerful play on turn 6 as well. We move on to Black Widow. Didn't actually see this coming at all. Black Widow, they're saying is, hey, still too good. They don't like it. They thought that the change from on reveal to activate would have been enough. It's still doing very well. This kind of surprises me, honestly, because according to One Tap, we see a 2% meta share. 2% meta share doesn't like scream to me, I need to get nerfed. Even if it's a little overtuned and like statistically probably performing better than they expected. I mean, the 53% win rate might be indicative of that. I don't know if you need to nerf a card like this. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. And they do note that the Grandmaster plays were probably overanalyzed and overappreciated. And the card was just good. And that's probably fair. But I don't know if I would have bought this. I don't know if I'd nerf this card. So this is one of the question marks for me. Like, I get it, but you probably just killed this card. Like, if it's at a 2% meta share right now, no one's going to play it now. So goodbye, Black Widow. Time to sit on the sidelines. This surprised me, and I'll tell you I like this. So Frigga I actually think is pretty good. It's only seeing a 4% meta share and a 48% win rate. Now, obviously the stats aren't great, but I do think the card is good. I think the card functions well. I think that the effect is really interesting. I think it has places where it can shine. And I'm going to give Cozy credit, because on the Snapchat, Cozy said, I can see this card going to 3-4. Is 3-4 too strong? And apparently, we're going to find out. Seeing it get buffed to a 3-4 makes sense. This has been a card that I think that has been on the fringe of being legitimately playable. And so now we get to see. I like the card a lot. I'm excited to play it. This is one of my favorite changes of the patch from like a I get to play this card standpoint. So let's see what happens with Frigga. This is a good change. I like it. Now, this is another one that's really interesting. Now, there's a couple changes in these patch notes, or OTA notes, which I think they're serving the principal idea of what I believe Second Dinner is trying to do, which is I believe Second Dinner is trying to make more effective archetypes across the game. Because we've seen like a lot of cards being added, like Scream and others, where they're trying to be like archetype build-arounds. Shuri's an archetype build-around. Obviously, this is a massive buff for Shuri, but also to Phoenix Force. It's going to be a huge buff to like the Nimrod style decks, Nimrod Destroyer type stuff, which is still technically Phoenix Force anyway. I don't know if this changes the Red Skull stuff, because unfortunately the Taskmaster change I think kind of killed those decks a little bit. But in Phoenix Force, this is huge. And I think that the Shuri getting the +2 power is going to be significant with Phoenix Force, especially when you consider that we recently had a buff to Sauron, but Sauron never saw play. Like, the buff never didn't do anything. Red Skull never came back. So seeing Shuri get the +2, I think makes a lot of sense. It does. And so I like to see this, because the more archetypes we have viable in the meta, the fresher the game's going to feel. Now, when they changed Lockjaw so that like they could keep throwing cards in, right, the stones and stuff, and nothing really happened with it. Seeing a 1% meta share at a 45% win rate would be indicative that this card just wasn't good and it needed something else. And so seeing it get +1 power, I don't think it does enough, because it's the 4 cost. It's that simple, right? It's the 4 cost that kills this card. I would rather see it at 3 cost and a reduced power line. I have been a believer that it should be 3 cost. I've said this before. In the lore, if you are unfortunate enough to have watched Inhumans, or if you've read the comics and stuff, you know that Lockjaw gets tired when he does his thing, and it's part of his story. Like, he gets exhausted by teleporting people. I think it would be cool if he was like a 3-3, and every time you swapped into him, he got a -1. So he swapped someone, but went to 3-2, 3-1, 3-0, 3-1 or whatever, because he's getting exhausted. I think that'd be a cool balance thing, good flavor. Snap's team tends to like do a lot of good work from a lore perspective, and I think that they're missing it with Lockjaw. So I hope that one of you guys listen and say like, hey, that's actually a pretty good idea, Alex. Thanks for that. Steal it, please. I want Lockjaw to be playable again, because at least, again, it's a new take. It's a different take on archetypes, and the more we have, the better the game's going to be. Talking about archetypes that are kind of dead, Asgardian decks. Now, I absolutely used to love Asgardian decks. In fact, my Beta Ray build deck was a meta shaker at the time of the release, and then they changed Zabu, and then blah, blah, blah. A bunch of stuff happened, and it just kind of fell off. At the time, it was the Zabu change and Darkhawk. Darkhawk at the time was a 4-costed card, so that tells you how old that deck was. But here, like, I get it. Like, you need to do something. They talked about maybe changing Beta Ray Bill, giving him more power, doing something along those lines. But I do agree with them, honestly, that instead of giving Beta Ray Bill additional power, just give the Stormbreaker something. Like, make the Stormbreaker a 0-3. Make it hit a little harder. Still does the thing with Beta Ray. You can still buff Beta Ray. But I like the idea of a 0-3 Stormbreaker. I think that's kind of cute in a way, right? It gives you additional reach with Odin now. I think that, like, this is not insignificant. What's unfortunate about it is that it still makes it so that Stormbreaker does not, like, it still functions with Lockjaw, but you, with that 3 power, like, you probably don't want to Lockjaw it. So, I don't know. I like this change. 45% win rate for Beta Ray. Those are Beta Ray stats, by the way. So, a 45% win rate, 1% play rate. Something had to happen. It wasn't doing what it had to do. And again, I've said that one of the key things I've been seeing with Marvel Snap lately is, like, I feel like they're trying to enable more archetypes for meta game variety, and I think that's a great approach. Changing Cerebro from a 3 to a 2 definitely helps in that. Not that this is a crazy change, because you were often playing them at 2 anyways, because, like, you'd Ravonna or whatever it is. Like, C2, I don't know what C2 is doing now. But this definitely helps kind of, like, get him out early, sneak him in on turn 6. The key thing on turn 6, where you're often able to play Cerebro and Mystique together, you can still do that, obviously, but you have that 1 additional energy. Having them discounted is not crazy. And having them at a 1 with something like Ravonna is huge. So, like, yeah. Give them something. Give them something. What happens? What's the worst that happens? Does Cerebro break the meta? You know what I mean? Like, probably not. So, making him a 2-0, I think, makes a lot of sense. So, this is a change that I can get behind as well. And obviously, at a 44% win rate and almost no meta share. Oh, man. There was a point in time when Miss Marvel was a 5-power card, that C5 was legit. C3 has had multiple innings of being legit. And now Cerebro has had, like, these minor nerfs, like Shadow King moving around, and just kind of killed the card, unfortunately. Then Elsa Bloodstone. This had to happen. Can you imagine not buffing Elsa Bloodstone with Galacta out there? Something had to happen. I mean, I don't think this is enough. I really don't think it's enough. You have a 3-4. Yeah, that's okay, I guess. It's just not, like, you still have the same effect. It needed more. I think it needed to go to 3 power, considering how easy Galacta is. This is 1 cost cheaper, sure. But Galacta absolutely slaps. Like, Galacta's so much better than this. So yeah, like, okay, you made a change. You added some power to Elsa. I don't think it's enough. You still don't play Elsa. I think that you always just play Galacta, because Galacta's just straight up better. That's just my opinion. Hopefully Elsa breaks the meta and I'm wrong. That's what I would like to see, because I like Elsa. I like the flavor of the card. I'd almost rather have them gone to, like, 3-2 and give it +3 again. Galacta's doing +3. Why can't Elsa? You know. Then again, what do I know? I'm not a game dev. I'm just a YouTuber who talks too much. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I got another video for you on the screen. If you're interested, hit that like button if you haven't already, if you like the video at least. And we'll see you on that next one. Thanks for all your support, guys. I love you.